Hey guys, Jim Vanosky with Manufacturing Talks. Okay, let me hit you. There's stories about riding on the Goodyear blimp, about switching Folgers coffee from metal cans to plastic tubs, and oh, by the way, coming up with the Folgers tagline, "The best part of waking up." You've heard that one. Riding upside down in a Sikorsky helicopter. Yeah, all stories from our guest today. Was he in manufacturing? Not directly. He was an ad man. Name's John Bowman. He's here to tell us about his decades and decades of cool stories that involved manufacturing when he worked with them. So stay tuned. He's going to be with us in about 30 seconds here on Manufacturing Talks.
Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vanosky. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I am Jim Vanosky, your host, and I'm really glad today to be joined by an old pal of mine from years back, and he's got a lot to share with us. John Bowman. He is Adman Emeritus at Admeritus. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Jim. It's great to be here with you. Good to see you again.
Same here. Yeah, it's been a while. It's great to have you on. We're going to talk about our common background, and I think back to the years when we worked together, and it was always a great, fun time. Great teamwork, and yeah, it's just awesome to be reconnected with you and talking about some stuff. I think those of us in manufacturing don't think a lot about, and sometimes aren't really that great about. You are a marketer, right?
Yes, I am indeed. I spent 40 years doing that in New York City. So with many clients all over the world, including the one that company you and I share in common, General Mills. I worked with them for a dozen good years.
Well, why don't you give us the quick synopsis of those 40 years? I know that's a lot to cover in a short time, but yeah, give us the bird's eye view, and then we'll talk about some of the other stuff.
Great. Well, you know what? I'll step back even farther for a minute, just to give you a little background about who I am. I was, because it's a long background now. I was born in the first half of the 20th century, the last year of the first half. So I grew up in a little village called Ridgewood, New Jersey, and it was a great place to grow up. My joke about the town was everybody was just like me, but taller. So it was a beautiful place to grow up, get a great education. I particularly gravitated towards the arts in school. And then I went to Rutgers because I was a Jersey boy, and Rutgers was the school to go to. And again, it was a great school, but very eye-opening for me. Everybody was different from me. And so very eye-opening about the great big world. My dad hoped that I would be a math major because I had really good skills in math, and but also in languages. I'd been taking Spanish since I was in third grade. But I had always been interested in music. I played trumpet since I was in third grade. Nice. So in college, I was able to spread out my interests in arts, and I gravitated towards literature and creative writing. So I was an English major and a creative writing minor, and I graduated with those things. The week after I turned 22, I got married.
Wow.
My wife and I just celebrated our 53rd anniversary.
Wow, congratulations.
And, so she still hasn't wised up.
She's a slow learner. Really slow
learner. Thank the Lord.
Yeah, right.
So we have 3 children and now 5 grandchildren.
Excellent.
Because of my background in the arts, I decided to go into the advertising business, which I also started at 22.
Okay.
So I did that for all those years.
Yeah. Excellent. Now, before we dive into the advertising and marketing end, you mentioned your dad, and you shared in our back and forth before this show that he was a mechanical engineer. So, how did that play into your direction and your approach?
It's had a huge impact on me for my entire life.
Interesting.
My dad is my hero. He passed away a number of years ago, but he remains my hero in so many ways. I feel blessed. Uh, and so, just a quick aside, he was my troop leader in Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
Um, and as a leader, it also meant that I couldn't get away with anything. Because
Right.
he kept a close eye in particular on his son. But
Yep.
he had a leadership matter. So this is separate, but sort of related to being a mechanical engineer. His leadership style was caring and patient with the boys, but he was also disciplined and firm. So
Mhm.
that combination of caring yet firmness was great guidance. And I think that's how Dad approached his mechanical engineering as well. He was very passionate about it. Um, those skills that he had learned at Drexel University in Pennsylvania, he utilized in World War II. He was in a U.S. Navy construction battalion. They're called the
Oh,
SeaBees.
yeah. CBs.
And
Yep.
on D-Day, he and his guys landed at Utah Beach to
Wow.
build the Mulberry harbors and things that
Mhm.
allowed the heavy equipment to land on the beach.
It's
So
amazing.
that's an application of mechanical engineering right there.
For sure.
Um,
Yep.
but to me, as a boy, so this comes back to the advertising part. I saw my dad as an artist. I'd come
Mm.
down to the breakfast table in the morning, and he'd be sitting there already with an old gold in one hand and a pencil in the other hand and a yellow pad on the table before him with a cup of Folgers coffee. And he'd be just sketching things on this yellow pad. And I would ask him, what is that, Dad? What are you drawing? And he would explain to me, these are parts of machines that we'll be building. And I was like, really? That's amazing. And then he would go he had a part of the home where he had a whole mechanical drawing set up, and he would make disciplined full drawings of all the mechanical parts that he had imagined,
Mhm.
created in my mind. And once those were done, he'd say, "Come on, Johnny, hop in the car, and we'll go to the machine shop."
Mhm.
And so I'd hop along with him and go to the machine shop and watch the men uh, work with the drawings with my father
Yep.
on lathes and all kinds of machines um, that were fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
They weren't like the ones that Dad had in our shop at home. Um, they were, manufacturing parts
Yep.
for large machines.
Yep.
So once all that was done, he would invite me to go on site in the factory. A lot of what he did was packaging machinery,
Okay.
engineering for packaging machinery,
Yep.
but he also worked on other things as well. And so I'd get to see them install the machinery in the factories, and then get to watch them work, come alive. And that was
Mhm.
always a very exciting moment for the people in the factory, for the people who had bought my father's designs, and for me. So as a boy, I soaked it all in. The
Mhm.
smells of the factory floor, I will never forget.
Yep.
It was a
Yep.
combination of oil and sweat.
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
of that. Yeah. And so that's a memory that's embedded in there with my love for my father. I like to
Amazing.
be in places like that. The din of
Yeah.
the factory.
Yep.
You never forget that. The ballet, I'll call it a ballet of the factory, the movement of men and machines going on. Big fascination for me.
Very
So,
poetic.
and I saw it as art and poetry.
Yeah.
So when I became an English major in college, and my dad said to me, Johnny, what are you going to do with that? And I answered him this way, Dad, I'm going to be just like you. I'm going to be a creator.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
before he could object and say, I'm a mechanical engineer, I would say, I watched you create with drawings and metal.
Yep.
I create with words and ideas, and I'm going to find a way to make a living out of that. He seemed skeptical, but okay. And once I got into the advertising business, he began to understand what I meant,
Yep.
because I was helping to create more powerful brands by bringing words and ideas to working with clients. So I would help them to engineer success. That's a way to look at it, by using
Yeah.
a combination of art and science, because working with consumers is science as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's there's so much we could talk about there. I'm a mechanical engineer by degree myself, and yeah, just
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, the way you describe manufacturing just kind of reinforces obviously my lifelong love for that corner of our business world. But we're here to talk about you. So tell us now, tell us a few of the highlights of your career in advertising through all those
Sure.
decades. Just amazing.
Yeah. Um, because it's so long, I'll kind of break it into 4 phases, 4 quick phases for you. So
Okay.
for the first phase, each one was about a decade. In the first phase, I was an advertising creator, so a copywriter, and worked primarily with what was called business to business clients, but also some consumer clients. So business to business clients that I worked with included DuPont, Goodyear, United Technologies, Ingersoll Rand, and then consumer clients towards the end of that first decade were Dannon yogurt. We may talk about yogurt again
Yeah,
further.
sure.
It was a fascinating business and a really interesting time, because yogurt was just breaking in America back then.
Right.
This is in the 70s. And Dannon we did with Dannon one of the really original yogurt advertising campaigns, which
Yep.
featured Russians who lived over 100 years old because they ate yogurt.
Yep.
Um, uh, and so a little bit about business to business and doing advertising with them. That's when I started insisting on going into manufacturing facilities.
Hmm.
Uh, I was spurred on by my growing up with my father.
Yep.
So, of course, I automatically wanted to do it. But my reasoning was also I want to get a full picture of your business and your brand. So, if I'm going to work on, let's say it was refinishing paints for DuPont, I want to go see where they're made. I want to go see how they're made. I may
Mhm.
notice things about them that you take for granted that could become a differential advantage for your business relative to your competitors. And they accepted that, and it worked. Same thing with Goodyear. I would go to Akron, Ohio. I remember the first time I went there. A client met me at the airport and drove me into Akron. And as soon as we got there, I could smell the rubber in the
Hmm.
air. And
Yep.
he noticed that and he said, "Oh, you smell the money in the air."
Right.
So again, that's where literally the rubber meets the road.
Uh-huh.
And I got not only to go into their plants, but also get a ride in the Goodyear blimp. So
Oh,
not a bad
geez.
deal. Not
That's
a bad
awesome.
deal. So that was the first 10 years. The second 10 years, I became a campaign creator. So that meant I wasn't writing the specific ads anymore. I became a link between consumers, people,
Mhm.
and brands like AT&T, uh, the United States Army, De Beers, Diamonds, General Motors. And on their behalf, I would go and meet people and learn what their lives were about, what they were interested in, and look for insights that I could then link back to what the brands offered. So again, I want to go to the General Mills plant. I want to go to the Procter & Gamble plant. I couldn't go into diamond mines. That was what I couldn't
Right.
do. Um, um, and so that was the second phase, was being the link to the consumer and creating campaigns. The third phase was about strategic direction. The people I'd worked with in the two earlier phases had gone on to higher positions within their company. Um, and so therefore my relationships started to become more valuable to them and to the agency that I was working at the time. I worked at three separate agencies um, in those 40 years. And so I would help develop strategies with them, business strategies. And once again, it was important for me to see how the business is done, not just be told how it's done, but to see
Mhm.
it with my own eyes and bring things to it. Uh, I'll give you a quick example of how that can help. Uh, when we first, I was at an agency named NWR. It was the very first agency in the United States,
Mm.
and it lasted from the 1860s until the year 2000. It was very successful. They created the very first television commercial, the very first radio commercial. They
Wow.
had breakthroughs and breakthroughs, and so we were just about to work with KitchenAid. KitchenAid had hired us. Uh, and KitchenAid is in a business that's known as white goods. And the white goods are the appliances they produce. They're not white, but they're called white goods for some reason.
Yeah.
Some of them are white. And use the same philosophy to link between the consumers and what they're looking for and the brand for what it wants to promote. And what consumers basically wanted, this shouldn't be any surprise, is what they call performance, reliability, and durability. It's going to
Mhm.
do the job it's supposed to do. It's going to do it every time, and it's going to last for a long time. That's what they
Yep.
want. And then you go to the KitchenAid factory, and you see how they do what they're doing to ultra tight tolerances,
Yep.
using a very specific gauges of metal, um, their own proprietary processes in designing and even assembling the equipment. And what merged them together was the idea of KitchenAid for the way it's made. And that idea, as I recall, was developed around 1980. And here we are in 2024, and KitchenAid still uses that campaign.
Yeah. That's
Uh,
something.
and so that's a powerful idea that can come out of merging consumer insight with brand insight. Brand includes manufacturing, from my point of view.
Yep.
That's in some ways the very heart and soul of what goes on.
Yep.
Uh, let's see, the fourth and final phase of my career, which was probably when I met you, Jim. At that time, the clients I worked with for the longest in my career spanned over 3 agencies.
Mhm.
I became so important to the client's brand. If they wanted to move the brand, they moved me with it.
Yep.
And so Procter and Gamble, I worked with at 3 agencies over 35 years, and
Wow.
General Mills at 2 agencies over a dozen years.
Yep.
And in that final dozen years, yeah, that's when I switched primarily to the last phase, which I call global leadership. So I
Mm.
became global leader at my final agency, which was called Saatchi and Saatchi, and a global leader almost exclusively. I worked almost exclusively with General Mills that last decade on almost all of their U.S. brands, only a couple that we didn't, and many of their international brands, including Nature Valley, Wan Chai Ferry, Haagen-Dazs. And so that's kind of the progression of my career, but how I never left my roots
Yeah.
from writing, caring about manufacturing, and the consumer.
So I love how you hit on manufacturing through every segment you just described. And I've kind of in the back of my mind been formulating this hypothesis about, the different ways we've gone wrong in manufacturing in America. And one of them is that our business leadership has become so utterly divorced from the makers and the people who are on the floor making the products, to the extent where, in a lot of industries, they don't even care who makes it, where it's made. And I just find it intriguing that you have that completely different approach.
Yes,
Obviously going back to your dad. So that to me is a miss on that side of the business. Now, if we flip that and look at what you learned through all your years of being that kind of creative, non-manufacturing guy visiting the manufacturers, what is it on the manufacturing side that people should be thinking about, and maybe that we're missing, not being directly involved in that?
well, based on what you just said, Jim, uh, one thing that may be missing is getting a seat at the table.
Ooh, good one.
Yeah, I can't say that I exactly know how to do that, but getting a seat at the table, knowing this business strategies that are being developed, knowing the communication strategies that are being developed, bringing the voice of the factory floor, the manufacturing side, into their thinking. My experience over time, I'll give you a for instance. This is not precisely manufacturing. It was with Continental Airlines, so it bears some similarity.
Yep.
They were put together as an amalgamation of different airlines, became Continental Airlines, and they struggled at first until they brought in a CEO named Gordon Bethune. He's one of the smartest and best CEOs I ever worked with.
Yep.
He boiled the strategy for success down to something very simple. He said, we're going to pivot from our customers, pivot from backpacks to briefcases. Wow, that was a big move. How was he going to do that? How was he going to make that change? Part of it was going to be advertising. But first, he went to the employees. He went to the people on the line. So being on the operational line of airlines is somewhat similar to being in manufacturing facilities. Again, this is where the rubber hits the road. And they were brought in to provide advice on what to do. One of the things that was discovered was from the consumer side to guys with briefcases, the most important thing was on-time arrivals. and Continental did not do well in that. So the people who were on the jetways said there's no clock in the jetway for us to know what time it's leaving.
Hmm.
And that was discovered then through modeling. The factor that had the single most important relationship with time of arrival was time of departure.
Mm-hmm.
So the employees made that idea. And then we could promise to consumers with a campaign that was called Work Hard, Fly Right. That's what the people in the airline wanted to do. And that's what the flying public, the business public wanted.
Right.
I work hard. I want to fly right.
Right.
And to put the rubber further on the road, Gordon Bethune promised every employee, including all of the union employees, a check every month. It wasn't a big check, and everyone got the same size. I think it was about $100. Every month that they were in the top three, they would all receive a check. They were all
every time
together. So there was no separation between management, headquarters, all the different airports, and of course the service facilities that they have. So if you take that, I guess this is more of an opportunity for manufacturing. Once you get a voice, look for common ground.
Hmm.
And if those rewards can be shared, I'm guessing, Jim, that most of the plants you worked in, they had unionized employees. Is that true or not true?
A good number of them for sure. Yeah.
Yes. And you know that there's always a conflict and a struggle between unions and management.
Yep.
You can blow right through those if you want to engage everyone in the same business.
Yep.
And the people who make the product, I just bought a new guitar. And it's from a company called Zager. And there's a luthier, Denny Zager, who's been making guitars since 1969. So his heart is in every guitar he makes. It's in his business. And it's in my guitar.
Yeah.
And so I want to feel connected too. And so think about how far manufacturing side may feel from consumers. That it should all be brought closer. That's something to do. Manufacturing can speak up for it, speak for the advantages that it would bring, and management can determine if they want to give that a try. It's worked wherever I've seen it. So I recommend.
Good advice.
Does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah, that's phenomenal. We've talked a lot about manufacturing. I'm just curious, as you know, a guy who's spent his whole career there, in your experience, all the many visits you've had to plants and people you've worked with in my side of the world, what's the number one kind of standout story from the manufacturing world that you want to share?
Wow. Yeah, there are so many that.
I bet.
That
you flew on the Goodyear blimp, for God's sake.
Exactly. But I'll tell you what so I could talk about, because this is an early and very fun one for me, going to the Sikorsky plant in Shelton, Connecticut, where they build and assemble all the way from the kinds of helicopters that regular people can go into military helicopters. And then I went down to West Palm Beach, and their test pilots took and flew me upside down. But I'm not going to tell you that.
Jeez.
It's that's that. I'll go in. You know, I'll leave that one aside.
Wow.
Another one that comes up is I went to many Procter and Gamble plants, but in the Folgers plant, I worked with Folgers for 25 years at 3 different agencies. And at the Folgers plant, I discovered hidden notes in the plant conference room. But I'm not going to tell you about that unless you want to hear about it later.
Wow.
But I will talk about Folgers. So that Folgers plant in New Orleans was fascinating to me. All the way from the supply chain of beans, so the green beans that come into the factory are sorted, and then become roasted in very specific ways to create different flavor profiles. Along the way, there was a person, his name was Will Papa, and he was their master cupper. So just as there is a brewmeister in a beer factory, which I've been to also, the master cupper is looking for that exact flavor, because Folgers was, when I started working with them, we helped them become the #1 coffee in America with a campaign, "The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup."
Yeah. Who doesn't know that one?
Yeah, exactly. And
Wow.
they still use that to this day. We began it in 1984, and here it is 40 years later.
40 years. Wow.
It's still the #1 retail coffee brand in America.
Good work.
And it worked. It worked. And their plant showed me why it worked.
Yeah.
Why? Because that first cup of the day, to us, that makes or breaks your day in a way.
That's right.
That first sip, that first cup, it's got to be that way. If it's not, so you have to be able to depend on it. And that means what goes on the manufacturing side is equally important. So specific kinds of beans are used, specific type of roasting is done, specific kind of grinds are made. The master cupper is making sure that last year's Folgers taste like this year's Folgers. While you're going to have crop differences every year, you don't have taste differences in the end.
Yep.
So that was, and then I'd watch towards the once it gets into packaging. At that time, when I first went there, all coffee was in cans, and the cans. I don't know if you remember, they had little ridges.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and my dad had Folgers cans in the basement that he kept screws and bolts in, and things like
Absolutely.
that.
Didn't everyone's dad have that?
Yeah, I think so. And so I'd watch these cans being shuttled in conveyors, and I called them just marching along there, Folger soldiers. Those are Folger soldiers going out into the field to make people's day.
Yep.
And so that's the first part of my Folger story. The second part of my manufacturing story is Folgers made a decision to move from metal cans to plastic canisters.
Right.
And I was in on that from the ground floor. It was a major, major change.
Yep.
That was also going to create strategic market advantage if they were able to pull it off. So from the testing phases, having different blow molds made. And then I would do consumer parts to have people look at, and because their first view is shock. What's coffee doing in plastic? But then they found things to like once the designs were made so that the can no longer had to be totally cylindrical. If it was a larger can, it could have a shape, a hand shape put to it to make the pouring of the grounds easier.
Yep.
Then they discovered, so it was no longer vacuum packed, and that was a key part of the consumer experience. Open that coffee, out comes the aroma. It was a hugely important thing to consumers. And the first attempts at using plastic, there was no no sights and sounds and smells to it. So those were then built into the process.
Yep.
We named, and I helped to name, the top is called the aroma seal, because that's the most
Yep.
important thing. And then instead of just being put into the plastic, it was pressurized. And once you pull off the foil underneath, out comes the coffee aroma, because it's under pressure.
Right.
So no longer being released by vacuum, it's being released by pressure.
Yep.
Fascinating thing. And we developed advertising, and again, all based around aroma and the sights and sounds that you can expect to experience. And then the classic Folgers Brighten Your Day experience at the end. Very successful advertising, changed the game in the whole business. Maxwell House was caught with their unready. That was a great, for me, manufacturing experience, because I also got to see the plant changes, not only in the labs, but in the plants. They had retooling, retraining, lots of things. And
it's a
I
big
was
change.
taken along on the ride. So that's probably what stands out the most to me in my career.
Very cool. And so now you're what? Kind of semi-retired? Is that?
I am now completely retired.
You're completely, well, you can't be completely, because you're still Adman Emeritus at Admeritus, right? So
Admeritus, correct. So
dabbling a little?
A little, but these days, very little, because I've been promoted from my advertising and marketing roles to my role as a grandfather. And that is the most important position I've ever occupied in my life. We have 5 wonderful grandchildren. They all call me Granddude.
That is so fitting.
Which is why I grew this beard, you know? I don't know if you ever watched The Great Lebowski, but, you know, he's got a beard. The dude abides.
Yep. Yep. Wonderful.
So these days I'm Granddude. I still, the Admeritus title, company, and the title is just made up so that, because I got very close to many people in my career and reconnect with them, as I am with you right now.
Yep.
And it allows me to keep my, let's put it this way, I'm out of advertising, but advertising isn't out of me.
Right. Yep.
So I'm still partly in the game, but I don't do it for a living anymore. It's just out of interest in the people, their progress, what happens to brands over time, which can change. Today, I read the news that Yoplait is leaving the General Mills company.
Yep.
And that's when you've worked closely with a brand like that, which you have and I have, it works its way from your mind to your heart.
For sure.
And including the guys in the factories, on the manufacturing side. It's a change for them. It leaves them unsure at some time. But here's a success story. It's related to Folgers again. So when at my last agency, Saatchi, when Folgers went to the Smuckers company, and it's the biggest brand at the Smuckers company. So you'd think, like, well, why wouldn't it be Smuckers Jam? But the biggest brand at their company, the biggest category and biggest brand is coffee.
Wow.
And the biggest brand within coffee is Folgers.
Yep.
So it went from a company, Procter & Gamble, that didn't have a major focus on food anymore,
right,
into a company that has a lifelong, the life of the company, focused on food. And Folgers has thrived under that. So this is my hope for Yoplait. Yoplait is a very different business, from everything from supply chain to manufacturing to shelf life. It's all different than all the other General Mills businesses, but it's going to go to businesses that specialize in dairy.
Yep.
And I think it has a good chance that they'll thrive there.
Yeah, I don't know that much about Lactalis, but what I'm reading is they're hungry. And
They're hungry.
that's a good thing to have behind you.
Absolutely. No question about it. So we wish them the best and hope them the best, including all the guys who are on the factory floors doing that. I don't know
Right.
what their plans will be for manufacturing. So I hope that they will thrive as well.
Yeah. You and me both. Well, we're about out of time. Anything we haven't touched on that you want to hit real quick?
No, other than it's great to see you again, Jim.
It's
Uh,
very
I,
good to see
I
you. Yep.
yeah, I follow you online. I read you in Forbes. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. I will do that. And, it's funny you mentioned those relationships you built, and I saw you pop up on LinkedIn last month and thought, we've been so deep in manufacturing lately. It would be very cool to get some different perspective and talk about a guy who can bring it. And that's where this came from. And man, you brought it. This was awesome.
I'm glad, Jim. Thanks so much.
Yeah, John, thank you for being here. And of course, as always, thanks to those of you in the audience. You are why we're here. And so, John brought some of the best stories I think we've ever had on this show in going on 120 episodes. I can't promise they're all going to be that good, but they'll be good. So tune in every Tuesday. And now we're hitting on Thursdays as well. So
Wow.
new shows coming all the time. Yeah. So John, we'll have to have you back on down the road and hear about your new job a little more. But in the
Okay.
meantime, enjoy those grandkids and best of luck to you.
My pleasure. Good to talk with you, Jim.
Same here. Thanks again, everybody. Manufacturing Talks, Jim Vinosky signing off.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.